In closing, we believe this proposed legislation values the personal autonomy of Canadians, in line with the Supreme Court's decision in Carter, while ensuring the protection of vulnerable Canadians and the conscience rights of healthcare providers.
I'm going to move on then to another area of concern, which is the need to balance, on the one hand, the charter rights of patients, but also the charter rights of physicians and allied health professionals. That balance, the need for that balance, was expressly recognized by the Supreme Court at paragraph 132 of the Carter decision, and I guess I'm a little bit concerned that the legislation doesn't contain conscience protections. Instead, this has been left to the provinces, to the colleges, to professional regulating bodies, and I was wondering if you might be able to comment on why you've chosen to effectively pass the buck on to the provinces on something as important as protecting what are fundamental freedoms under the Charter, Section 2 Charter rights.
Go ahead. Sure. Sorry.
Well, thank you for the question, and I know that the question of conscience rights of medical practitioners has been one that has been raised in many forums in terms of discussion. Certainly was raised at the Special Joint Committee. We have, in terms of the legislation, there is nothing in our legislation that would compel a medical practitioner to perform medical assistance in dying. As you point out, the jurisdiction in terms of regulations falls to the provinces and territories. Having said that, I know that my colleague, Minister Philpott, will continue to work extremely collaboratively, as she has been, with the provinces and territories to assist them in where possible, ensuring that there is that comprehensive regulatory framework that is, or to put it in place.
And I would just underline, and this is not within the legislation, but you've probably heard us talking about this around the topic of conscience rights, that recognizing both the fact that we are committed to upholding the conscience rights of healthcare providers, and at the same time making sure that Canadians will have access to options for care. We have made it clear to the provinces and territories, and are in fact already working with them on developing a care coordination system for end-of-life care that will ensure that if a person is in a situation where their particular provider does not feel, for reasons of conscience, that they want to participate, that we would put in a mechanism in place. This has been greeted with great enthusiasm by medical associations and by provinces and territories, and I look forward to giving you more details as that develops.
Left. Okay. Do you want to have a very short question?
Sure, very quickly. Under the framework established by Bill C14, a provincial healthcare facility could choose not to provide medical assistance in dying. I'd just like to know what your views are on that, how you feel about that.
For a province?
Yes, a provincial healthcare facility could choose not to provide medical assistance in dying.
So, as you know, the delivery of healthcare is in the domain of the provinces and territories. However, in introducing this bill, we've made it clear that the federal government acknowledges that medical assistance in dying is to be considered a medically necessary service. Like any other medically necessary service, we expect provinces to act within the Canada Health Act and to be sure that all Canadians have access to these particular options for care, and we will certainly work with the provinces and territories to make sure that Canadians do have the access they require.
Minister Philpott, you indicated that the bill provides protection for healthcare professionals, and I'm thinking you're suggesting it does from a liability perspective. But how about healthcare professionals' protection for conscience rights? Why not include that right away? Why is liability so important? Actually, I want to know why conscience rights aren't in there, and in what area could they be put?
So this, as you know, this is a piece of legislation that is an amendment to the criminal code. It's not a piece of legislation that describes the working medical practice, for instance. It's not a health bill. It's a piece of amendment to a criminal code, and therefore it was deemed not to be appropriate to specify that. We have made that very clear that there is nothing in here that compels a medical practitioner to participate in medical assistance in dying. The actual oversight of medical practitioners is done at the provincial and territorial level. We have indicated to them that it is our expectations that the conscience rights of providers would be protected. I don't know whether you want to elaborate more on why it wasn't included, but.
So with respect to the rights of conscience for medical practitioners, now it's my understanding and what you've indicated today as well, and based on the questions of our colleagues here, is there no way to codify the rights of conscience, for example, saying somebody cannot be forced to administer medical assistance in dying as part of the criminal code, or to make it a penalty to coerce somebody into administering death under this legislation? Or would that not be in the federal jurisdiction at all? Would that be something that would be dealt at the provincial level?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And there is nothing in Bill C14, our proposed legislation, that would compel a medical practitioner to engage in medical assistance in dying. As you quite rightly point out, this is within the jurisdiction of the provinces and territories, and Minister Philpott will continue to work with her counterparts to assist and putting together the regulatory frameworks or assist the provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question for Minister Wilson-Raybould, just to follow up on the question posed by Ms. Khalid, wherein, if I heard you correctly, Minister, you had said that with respect to conscience protections, that was an area that fell within provincial jurisdiction. Now, we, of course, are legislating in part under Parliament's criminal law power. At paragraph 53 of the Carter decision, the Supreme Court expressly said that health care is an area of concurrent jurisdiction. So having regard for those facts, as well as Section 3.1 of the Civil Marriage Act, which said that religious officials don't have to perform civil marriages, again in an area that has both provincial and federal jurisdiction overlap. Perhaps, I just want to be clear, are you saying that Parliament cannot legislate on conscience protections in the face of the foregoing?
Well, we, first of all, with respect to the Civil Marriage Act, I know that has been brought up a number of times, and what was provided within that was that religious officials would not have to serve a specific community in terms of marriages, but we're talking about doctors serving the public at large, and we believe that it is, well, we don't believe, it's the jurisdiction of the provinces and territories to ensure the regulation of the conscience rights of medical practitioners. There's nothing in our legislation, as you know, that would compel a medical practitioner to perform medical assistance in dying.
Can I wrap up by asking a wrap-up question on sorry to intervene, but on Mr. Cooper's question, Ms. Khalid had made a different suggestion. She had suggested the criminal code could be amended in order to prohibit anyone from coercing a medical professional to perform physician-assisted suicide. I presume that you would agree that that would be within the prohibition that could exist in the criminal code, could it not? I mean, regulations may be provincial and territorial, but that could theoretically exist?
Well, I mean, renovation of the criminal code is something that we are undertaking in a comprehensive way. I'm not sure that the question is raising a particular issue that we could address that couldn't be already addressed in terms of the discussions that we're having with the provinces and territories, but certainly we, at the questions that have been raised here, will take a look.